A legend they believed, until humanity entered the war. The human shuttle descended through the golden clouds of the Union capital world, and Ambassador Park Ji-soo watched through the window as the great city spread out below her like a garden of crystal and light. She had studied the files on every species in the Galactic Union during the long journey here, and she understood exactly how they viewed her people as primitives, as newcomers, as children playing at being a spacefaring civilization. But Ji-soo had not come here to prove anything or to demand respect. She had come because billions of innocent lives hung in the balance, and her people could not simply stand by and watch them die. The shuttle landed on a platform surrounded by armed guards, and Ji-soo stepped out into the warm alien air with her head held high and her heart beating steady. She wore the simple black uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, and she carried no weapons except the strength of her words. Counselor Yeren waited at the edge of the platform, and the old Cathari bowed her head in greeting. Ambassador Park, welcome to our world. I must confess that I have been eager to meet your kind ever since we learned of your existence. Ji-soo returned the bow with perfect form. The honor is mine, Counselor. I only wish we could meet under better circumstances. Yeren led the human ambassador through gleaming corridors toward the High Council chamber, and along the way Ji-soo noticed the fearful glances of every alien they passed. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with suspicion, and a few with something that might have been hope. The council chamber was vast and filled with representatives from dozens of species, and they all fell silent when Ji-soo entered. She walked to the center of the room and faced the elevated seats where the most powerful leaders of the Union waited with judgment in their eyes. High Chancellor Morn spoke first, and his voice echoed through the massive space. Ambassador Park, we have received your government's offer of military assistance, and I must tell you that we find it rather amusing. Laughter rippled through the chamber, and Ji-soo felt her jaw tighten but kept her expression calm. Fleet Admiral Torek rose from his seat and pointed one clawed finger at the human woman. Your species has 300 ships. We have lost more than that in a single battle against the Void Collective. What could you possibly offer us except more bodies for the enemy to consume? Ji-soo waited for the laughter to die down before she spoke. Admiral Torek, I understand your doubt, and I do not blame you for it. From your perspective, we must seem like insects trying to fight a storm. An accurate description, Torek snorted. But let me share something about my people that your intelligence files may have missed. Ji-soo activated a small device on her wrist, and holographic images appeared in the air around her. Earth is what your scientists would classify as a death world. A planet so hostile that most species would consider it unsurvivable. The images showed hurricanes tearing across oceans, volcanoes erupting with rivers of fire, earthquakes splitting the ground open, and predators with teeth and claws hunting in every environment imaginable. We evolved on this world, Ji-soo continued, and we have been fighting for survival since our very first breath. We have fought each other in wars that lasted generations, and we have fought nature itself every single day of our existence. Chancellor Morn waved his hand dismissively. Many species have violent histories, Ambassador. That does not make them capable of defeating the Void Collective. You are correct, Chancellor, Ji-soo agreed. But history has taught us something valuable. We have learned how to fight enemies stronger than ourselves and win. We have learned how to turn weakness into strength, how to use cunning when force is not enough, and how to keep fighting long after any rational being would have surrendered. Admiral Torek laughed again, but this time it sounded less certain. Pretty words, human, but words do not win wars. Then let us prove ourselves with actions, Ji-soo said with steel in her voice. Give us one battle, one mission, one chance to show you what humanity can do. If we fail, You lose nothing but a handful of primitive ships you never wanted in the first place." The council members whispered among themselves, and Yaren watched with growing hope as Jisoo stood firm against their doubts. Finally, Chancellor Morin raised his hand for silence. "Very well, Ambassador. We have an outpost on the edge of contested space, a station called Serenus that the Void Collective has marked for destruction. Our intelligence suggests that 40 enemy warships are moving to attack it within the week." Torek grinned with malicious pleasure. "We were planning to abandon that outpost anyway. If your people want to die defending it, we will not stop you." Jisoo felt her heart grow cold at the cruelty in his words, but she did not let it show on her face. "We accept this mission, and we will defend Outpost Serenus with everything we have." "You have just signed the death warrant for your soldiers," Torek said. "But I suppose your species will learn soon enough what happens to those who challenge the Void Collective." Jisoo turned and walked toward the exit with measured steps, and as she passed Counselor Yaren, the old Cathari grabbed her arm gently. "Ambassador," Yaren whispered, "I believe in the legend, and I believe in your people. Please do not let them be right about you." Jisoo looked into those ancient golden eyes and saw something she had not expected to find here: genuine faith. "We will not disappoint you, Counselor, I promise you that." 3 days later, Captain Kang Donghyun stood on the bridge of the destroyer, Soul's Pride, and watched his small fleet of 12 ships drop out of hyperspace near Outpost Serenus. The station hung in the darkness like a fragile jewel, and somewhere out there in the black, 40 Void Collective warships were coming to destroy it. "All hands, this is the captain," Kang announced over the fleet-wide channel. "We are about to face an enemy that has never been defeated, with odds that any sane commander would call impossible. But we are not here to be sane. We are here to show the galaxy what humans can do when innocent lives are at stake. Prepare for battle." The stars seemed to hold their breath as the void ships appeared on the sensors, and history prepared to change forever. A legend, they believed, until humanity entered the war. The old Cathari stood before the young cadets with her forearms folded behind her back, and the dim light of the council chamber made her silver scales glow like moonlight on water. "Listen well," Counselor Yaren said in her ancient voice, "for I will tell you the story that our ancestors whispered across 10,000 generations." The cadets leaned forward in their seats, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear, for they knew why they had been gathered here tonight. The war was going badly, and morale had fallen to its lowest point in 2 centuries. Yaren walked slowly across the stone floor, her claws clicking with each step, and she gazed out the tall window at the stars that burned so far away. "Long before our civilization learned to sail between the stars, there existed a prophecy," she began, her voice soft but steady like a river that never stops flowing. "The ancient texts spoke of beings who slept in the third galactic arm on a world of fire and ice and poison and rage." One of the cadets raised a trembling hand. "Counselor, are you speaking of the sleeper legend?" Yaren nodded slowly, and a sad smile crossed her face. "Yes, young one, the very same legend that most of our people now dismiss as foolish mythology." She turned back to face them all, and her golden eyes seemed to hold the weight of centuries. "The prophecy tells us that when darkness spreads across the galaxy and all hope seems lost, the sleepers will awaken from their violent world and bring fire to our enemies." The cadets exchanged nervous glances, for they all knew the truth of their situation. The Void Collective had been winning this war for 200 years, and nothing the Galactic Union tried could stop them. The Void Collective was a hive mind species that moved through space like a plague of locusts through a field of grain. They did not negotiate, they did not trade, and they did not show mercy. They simply consumed everything in their path, absorbing entire civilizations into their collective consciousness. Yaren had watched 17 worlds fall to the void in her lifetime alone, and she carried that grief in her heart like stones in a bag. "Counselor," another cadet spoke up with desperation in his voice, "do you truly believe this legend is real? Do you think someone will come to save us?" Before Yaren could answer, the doors to the council chamber burst open with a tremendous crash. A young communications officer stumbled inside, her breath coming in quick gasps and her uniform soaked with sweat. "Counselor Yaren," the officer shouted, "you must come to the High Council immediately. Something incredible has happened." Yaren felt her old heart begin to pound against her ribs. "What is it, child? What has occurred?" The officer swallowed hard and tried to steady her shaking hands. "First contact, Counselor. We have made first contact with an unknown species. They call themselves humans, and they come from a planet called Earth." Yaren felt the blood drain from her face, and she gripped the edge of a nearby table to keep herself standing. "Where's this Earth located?" "The third galactic arm, Counselor. Their world sits in the exact region described in the ancient prophecy." The cadets erupted into excited whispers and fearful murmurs, but Yaren silenced them with a single raised hand. She walked toward the door on legs that suddenly felt young again, and hope bloomed in her chest for the first time in decades. But when she arrived at the High Council chamber, she found only disappointment and dismissal waiting for her. Fleet Admiral Torek of the Villani stood at the center of the room with his muscular arms crossed over his chest and a sneer on his reptilian face. "These humans are nothing special," he declared in his booming voice. "They have only recently discovered faster than light travel, and their technology is primitive compared to ours." High Chancellor Morin nodded in agreement from his elevated seat. "We have examined their ships and their weapons, and I must say I am not impressed. They possess perhaps 300 vessels in their entire fleet, and none of them could match even our oldest warships." Yaren stepped forward with her scales bristling in frustration. "But they come from the third arm. Does that not mean anything to this council?" Admiral Torek laughed, and it was not a kind sound. "You speak of fairy tales, Counselor. The sleeper legend is nothing more than a bedtime story for frightened children. These humans are simply another weak species who stumbled into the stars at the worst possible time." The other council members muttered their agreement, and Yaren felt her hope begin to wither like a flower without water. Then the alarms began to scream. Red lights flashed across every surface, and the emergency broadcast system crackled to life with terrible news. "Attention all council members. The Void Collective has launched a massive offensive against our border systems. 3 worlds have already fallen, and their fleet is advancing toward the inner territories." Panic seized the chamber as council members rushed to view the tactical displays. The images showed hundreds of void ships moving through space like a swarm of hungry insects, and mathematical projections estimated complete Union collapse within 6 months. Admiral Torek slammed his fist against the display console. "We cannot stop them. We simply do not have enough ships or soldiers." In that moment of chaos and fear, Yaren looked up at the stars visible through the chamber's great window, and she whispered a prayer to ancestors she had not spoken to in many years. "Please," she breathed, "let the legend be true. Let the sleepers save us all." Far across the galaxy, on a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, humanity was already preparing to answer that prayer, and they would bring with them a fury that the Void Collective had never imagined possible. A legend they believed until humanity entered the war. The Void Collective fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of black wasps. Their ships twisted and organic and wrong in ways that made the human crews feel sick just looking at them. Captain Kan Do-hyun stood at the center of his bridge and counted the enemy vessels on the tactical display. 42 ships, slightly more than intelligence had predicted. His own fleet numbered only 12, and every one of them was smaller and weaker than the enemy's smallest vessel. "Captain," His tactical officer, Lieutenant Beek Sujin, reported. The Void ships are forming a standard consumption formation. They expect us to either flee or line up for destruction. Kang smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made his crew both nervous and proud. Then let us give them something they do not expect. All ships, execute Scatter Protocol 7. The 12 human ships broke apart in 12 different directions, diving toward the nearby asteroid field like startled fish escaping a shark. The Void fleet paused in what might have been confusion. Prey had never behaved this way before. Across the galaxy, Union observers watched the battle through remote sensors, and Admiral Tarek laughed at what he saw. "Look at them run," he sneered. "I told you the humans were cowards. I told you the humans were cowards." But Counselor Yaren watched with narrowed eyes and whispered, "Wait and see, Admiral. Wait and see." Inside the asteroid field, Captain Kang's voice crackled through the communication channels. "All ships, remember your training. We are not here to fight them ship to ship. We are here to make them bleed. Use the rocks for cover, strike fast, and disappear before they can target you." The destroyer Bizen's Fury was the first to attack. Commander Novi Emin had hidden his ship behind a massive spinning asteroid, and when 3 Void vessels passed by hunting for prey, he struck from behind with every weapon his ship possessed. 2 of the enemy ships lost their engines in the first volley, and Bizen's Fury was already gone before they could return fire. The Void Collective had never encountered tactics like this. Their hive mind was designed for straightforward conquest: find prey, overwhelm prey, consume prey. But these humans refused to be prey, and they fought with a chaotic creativity that the hive mind could not predict or understand. Hours passed, and the battle continued in a way no one had ever seen before. Human ships would appear from impossible angles, fire devastating attacks, and vanish before the Void could respond. Sometimes they would attack in groups of 2 or 3, other times they would strike alone. There was no pattern the hive mind could analyze, no strategy it could counter. But the humans paid a price for their boldness. The frigate Ancient Star took a direct hit while covering the retreat of a damaged ally, and Captain Kang watched in grief as the ship broke apart in a bloom of fire and metal. 93 crew members died in an instant, and their sacrifice gave their comrades the time they needed to escape. "Captain," Lieutenant Beek said with tears in her eyes, "the Void ships are attempting to capture the Ancient Star's escape pods." Kang's hands tightened into fists. "Get me a channel to those pods." The communication crackled, and a voice came through Ensign Ominji, barely 20 years old, leading the 40 survivors in their tiny escape craft. "Captain Kang, we see them coming for us. What are your orders?" Kang closed his eyes and drew a deep breath. "Ensign, I cannot reach you in time. You know what the Void Collective does to prisoners. They absorb them into the hive mind, steal their memories, and their very souls." "I understand, Captain." Minji's voice was steady despite her fear. "We will not let them take us." The Union observers watched in horror as the human escape pods activated their self-destruct systems rather than allow themselves to be captured. Admiral Tarek's laughter died in his throat, replaced by something he had not felt in many years' respect. The battle raged for 72 hours without pause. Human crews fought past exhaustion, past fear, past every limit that biology said they should have. When the destroyer Daegu fell with all hands, the remaining ships fought harder. When Soul's Pride lost half its weapons, Captain Kang ordered his ship to ram a Void cruiser and somehow survived the collision. On the 3rd day, something unprecedented happened. The Void Collective retreated. 9 surviving enemy ships turned and fled into hyperspace, leaving behind the shattered remains of 31 of their vessels. The asteroid field was filled with wreckage and fire, and at the center of it all, 9 battered human ships floated in exhausted triumph. Captain Kang sat in his damaged command chair and stared at the tactical display that showed the impossible. They had won 12 ships against 42, and they had won. "Captain," Lieutenant Beak whispered, "the Union observers are requesting to speak with you." Kang nodded wearily. "Put them through." Admiral Tariq's face appeared on the screen, and the proud Vellani warrior looked as if someone had struck him in the gut. "Captain Kang," he said slowly, "I have fought in wars for over 60 years, and I have never seen anything like what I just witnessed. Your people are either insane or blessed by the gods themselves." "We are neither, Admiral," Kang replied with blood on his face and fire in his eyes. "We are simply human." In the Union capital, Councilor Yaren fell to her knees in the observation chamber and wept tears of joy. Around her, the other observers stood in stunned silence as the recordings of the battle played over and over on the screens. The legend, Yuring breathed through her tears. The legend is true. She looked up at the stars visible through the great window, and for the first time in 200 years, she saw hope written in their light. Far away, the Void Collective's Queen Mind received the memories of the survivors, and something stirred in her ancient consciousness, something she had not felt since her species first awakened millions of years ago. For the first time in her eternal existence, the Queen Mind knew fear. A legend, they believed, until humanity entered the war. The War Council chamber had never been so full, and every seat was occupied by admirals and generals from across the Galactic Union. But all eyes were fixed on the small human woman who stood at the central display with a pointer in her hand. General Shin Mai-rei had arrived from Earth only 3 weeks ago, but her reputation had already spread across the galaxy like wildfire. She was the architect of humanity's military doctrine, the mind behind the impossible victory at Serenus, and now she was here to teach the Union how to fight. "Your current strategy is what we call attrition warfare," Mai-rei explained in her calm and measured voice. "You meet the enemy in open battle, exchange casualties, and hope to outlast them through superior numbers. But you do not have superior numbers, and you have been losing this war for 2 centuries. Admiral Tariq nodded from his seat near the front. He had become one of humanity's strongest supporters after witnessing the battle at Serenus. "What do you suggest, General?" Mai-rei smiled and activated a new display showing dozens of tactical scenarios. "We must stop fighting the war they want and start fighting the war they fear. The Void Collective is a hive mind, which means their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness." She pointed to a diagram of the enemy's command structure. Every Void ship, every soldier, every drone is connected to a central consciousness. They share thoughts instantaneously, coordinate perfectly, and adapt as a single organism. This makes them terrifying in a straight fight. "Then how do we defeat such an enemy?" asked Chancellor Morin. "By breaking their unity," Mai-rei answered. "The hive mind cannot process chaos, cannot predict illogical behavior, cannot understand sacrifice. When we throw ourselves into danger to protect others, when we attack in patterns that make no strategic sense, when we choose death over surrender, the hive mind cannot comprehend why, and that confusion slows them down." The alien officers exchanged uncertain glances. These concepts were foreign to their orderly military traditions, but they had seen the results at Serenus. Over the following months, human advisors spread throughout the Union fleet, teaching new tactics and new ways of thinking. They trained alien soldiers to embrace creativity in combat, to take risks that seemed foolish but created opportunities, and to fight for each other as much as for victory. The first major test came at the liberation of the Cathari homeworld. Councilor Yaren had wept when she learned that her people's ancestral planet would be the target of the new offensive, and she had personally requested to accompany the fleet. Now she stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity's Dawn and watched as human and alien ships, fought side by side against the Void Occupation Force. The battle was brutal and chaotic, exactly as General Myray had planned. Human squadrons darted through the enemy formation like wolves through a herd of prey, drawing fire away from the larger Union vessels. Alien cruisers provided covering fire while human marines prepared for the ground assault. General, Captain Kang reported from his position leading the assault teams. "We are beginning our descent to the surface." "Understood, Captain," Myray replied. "Remember, our primary objective is the civilian population. The Void has been harvesting Cathari survivors for decades. We must reach them before the enemy can evacuate or execute them." The dropship screamed through the atmosphere and landed in the ruins of what had once been the Cathari capital city. Human soldiers poured out with weapons ready, and what they found would haunt their dreams for years to come. The Void Collective had herded thousands of surviving Cathari into massive processing facilities, where they were slowly being absorbed into the hive mind. Men, women, children, all of them trapped in nightmarish machines that were eating their very souls. Sergeant Park Junhee was the first to breach one of the facilities, and what he saw made his blood run cold. A young Cathari child hung suspended in organic tubes, her eyes glazed and her mouth open in a silent scream. "Cut them loose," Junhee ordered his squad. "Cut them all loose now." His soldiers moved without hesitation, slashing through the alien machinery and catching the falling prisoners in their arms. The Void drones inside the facility turned to attack, but the humans formed a protective circle around the freed captives and fought with desperate fury. When a plasma bolt struck near a cluster of rescued children, Private Choa Yumbi threw herself over them without thinking. The blast burned through her armor and seared her back, but she did not move until every child had been carried to safety. The Union soldiers who fought alongside the humans watched in amazement. They had never seen warriors protect strangers with such fierce dedication, never witnessed such complete disregard for personal safety in service of others. "Why do you do this?" a Cathari officer asked as human medics treated the wounded prisoners. "These are not your people. Why would you die for them?" Sergeant Junhee looked up with tired eyes and smiled. "Because they are people, and that is enough. On Earth, we learned long ago that the only way to survive is to stand together, and that lesson does not stop at the borders of our own species." The liberation of the Cathari homeworld took 3 days, and when it was finished, more than 1 million survivors had been rescued from the Void's processing facilities. Human casualties were heavy, nearly 10,000 dead, but not a single soldier complained, because they knew their sacrifice had meant something. In the aftermath, something unprecedented happened across the galaxy. The Void Collective retreated from 3 entire star systems without firing a single shot. Their scouts had observed the human way of war, had seen the chaos and the sacrifice and the unstoppable determination, and the hive mind had decided to consolidate rather than face such unpredictable enemies. General Myray received the news with grim satisfaction. "They are afraid of us," she told her staff. "Good. Fear will make them desperate, and desperate enemies make mistakes." Far away in the dark heart of void space, the Queen Mind gathered her consciousness and prepared for one final gamble. If these humans could not be defeated in a conventional war, then she would destroy them with overwhelming force. She began summoning every ship in her empire for one massive assault, a blow so devastating that nothing could survive it. The final battle was coming, and the fate of the galaxy would be decided. A legend they believed, until humanity entered the war. The sky above the Union capital burned with the light of 10,000 ships, and the largest battle in galactic history had begun. The Void Collective had committed everything to this final assault, every warship, every carrier, every drone in their vast empire converging on a single target. The Queen Mind herself led the attack from her massive flagship, a vessel so large that it blocked out the stars like a hungry shadow. Admiral Torek stood on the bridge of the Union command ship and felt his heart sink as the enemy numbers continued to climb on the tactical display. "There are too many of them," he whispered. "Even with our new tactics, even with the humans fighting beside us, how can we possibly survive this?" General Shinmai stood beside him with her arms crossed and her eyes fixed on the enemy fleet. "We survive by doing what we have always done. Admiral, we fight until we cannot fight anymore, and then we find a way to keep fighting." The battle erupted across 1,000,000 kilometers of space, and the darkness filled with fire and death. Human destroyers weaved through the chaos with their crews pushing their ships beyond every limit. Union cruisers formed defensive lines around the populated planet below, taking hit after hit to shield the civilians from bombardment. Captain Kang Do-hyun commanded the human flagship Eternal Dawn from the heart of the fighting, and his voice rang out across every human channel. "All ships, remember why we are here. Behind us are billions of innocent lives, families and children, and dreams that will end forever if we fail. We do not fight for glory or conquest. We fight for them." The human fleet answered with a roar of determination, and they threw themselves against the enemy with renewed fury. But the Void Collective was relentless, and for every ship they destroyed, 2 more took its place. Hours passed, and the losses mounted on both sides. The Union flagship took critical damage and had to withdraw. 3 human carriers were lost with all hands. The defensive line began to crack under the endless assault. Then the Queen Mine made her move. Her massive flagship pushed through the center of the battle, ignoring the smaller ships that tried to stop her. She was heading directly for the planet below, and everyone knew what that meant. If she reached orbit, she would begin the consumption process, and every living soul on that world would be absorbed into the hive mind. "We cannot let her reach the planet," General May shouted. "All available ships, concentrate fire on the Queen ship." Hundreds of vessels turned their weapons on the enemy flagship, but the Queen Mine's defenses were too strong. Energy shields absorbed the attacks, and her massive hull shrugged off everything the combined fleet could throw at her. Captain Kang watched the Queen ship advance and felt the cold certainty of what must be done settle into his bones. He looked around the bridge at his crewmen and women who had fought beside him through impossible odds, who had become his family in the fire of war, and he made his decision. "Lieutenant Beak," he said quietly, "plot a collision course with the Queen ship." Sujin's fingers froze over her console, and she turned to face him with tears in her eyes. "Captain, that is a suicide run. There is no way to survive." "I know," Kang replied with a gentle smile. "But if we can destroy the Queen Mind, the hive will collapse. Every drone, every ship, every soldier will lose their connection and fall into chaos. It is the only way to end this." The bridge fell silent as the weight of his words settled over everyone. Then, one by one, each officer straightened in their seat and turned back to their stations. "Course plotted, Captain," Sujin said through her tears. "It has been an honor to serve with you." Kang opened a channel to the entire fleet, human and alien alike, and spoke his final words. "This is Captain Kang Do-hyun of the Eternal Dawn. We are making a run at the Queen ship, and we will not be coming back. To our Union allies, it has been a privilege to fight beside you. To my fellow humans, remember what we fight for. Not victory, not glory, but the people we love and the future they deserve." He paused and drew a deep breath. "We do not fight because we love war. We fight because we love what is behind us." The Eternal Dawn accelerated toward the Queen ship with every engine burning at maximum, and the Void drones tried desperately to stop her. Explosions tore through the human flagship, destroying decks and killing crew members by the dozen, but the ship kept going. On the bridge of the Union command ship, Counselor Yaren watched through streaming tears as the human vessel closed the distance. "The prophecy," she whispered. "The full prophecy. She recited the words she had memorized as a child, words that now seemed to burn with new meaning. When the sleepers of the third arm awaken, they will not fight for conquest. They will fight for those who cannot fight for themselves, and the darkness will fear the light they carry. The eternal dawn struck the queenship at the exact center of her command section, and for one frozen moment, the universe held its breath. Then the explosion came. A bloom of light brighter than any star erupted where the two ships met, and the shock wave rippled outward in all directions. The Queen Mind screamed across every frequency as her consciousness was torn apart, and throughout the Void Fleet, every ship and every drone suddenly went silent. Without the Queen Mind to guide them, the Void Collective crumbled. Ships drifted aimlessly, drones shut down, and soldiers collapsed where they stood. The hive mind that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia was gone. In the stunned aftermath, the survivors gathered to mourn and celebrate. The war was over, and against all odds, the light had won. 1 year later, Ambassador Park Ji-soo stood before a memorial on the Union Capitol, surrounded by representatives of every species in the galaxy. The monument bore the names of every soldier who had fallen, human and alien alike, with Captain Kang Do-yoon's name carved at the very top. Children from a dozen worlds played together in the shadow of the memorial, and their laughter filled the air like music. Counselor Yaren approached Ji-soo with slow steps and placed one aged hand on the ambassador's shoulder. "Your people fulfilled the legend," she said softly. "You saved us all." Ji-soo looked at the children and felt the grief in her heart mix with hope. "The legend was never about us," she replied. "It was about what any species can become when they choose to protect others instead of themselves." She placed a single flower at the base of the memorial and whispered a promise to the heroes who slept within the stars. "We will remember you forever." And across the galaxy, in every home and every school on every world, children grew up hearing stories of the humans, the sleepers who awakened, the warriors who chose love over fear, the legend that became history.